So let's, of course, start this broadcast with this big story from France, where after days of political uncertainty, the speculation has finally come to an end. Emmanuel Macron has appointed François Bayrou as the country's new prime minister. And the announcement has come after Macron's self-imposed 48-hour deadline came to an end on Thursday, prompting him to cut short his Poland trip and return to France. Now, Bayrou is a centrist leader who heads the democratic movement, which is in alliance with Macron's party. However, it is not a party of the centrist ensemble coalition. The 73-year-old veteran politician was being touted as Macron's obvious choice to become the head of the government. Now, the new prime minister has stressed on the need for reconciliation amongst the power corridors. Now, in the past, Bayrou has fielded himself as a presidential candidate in 2002, in 2007, and then again in 2012. And he briefly served as the Justice Minister under Macron's presidency in 2017. However, a legal case prompted Bayrou to step down from the post. The reaction from France's other political parties are also pouring in. The president of the far-right National Rally Party has urged the new prime minister to not be a dummy of the president. The Bardella has also clarified that they will not be calling a vote of no confidence immediately, giving an opportunity for Bayrou to bring a consensus across party lines.
Moi, j'appelle surtout le nouveau Premier ministre à ne pas être le prête-nom du macronisme, parce que les Français se sont exprimés très nombreux dans les urnes l'été dernier pour aspirer au changement, à une rupture raisonnable mais ferme avec la politique du président de la République. Et dans l'état actuel des choses, dans l'état actuel du Parlement, la continuité de la politique du pays ne peut plus être celle d'Emmanuel Macron.
François Bayrou is expected to put forth his list of ministers in the coming days. His biggest challenge, of course, remains the parliamentary approval of the budget for the year 2025. All right, now to give us more perspective in terms of the latest developments that are happening at this moment in Paris, we're joined by our correspondent Ross Cullen, who's joining us live from the French capital. Ross, this, of course, is a big moment in French politics. Emmanuel Macron, after quite a few days of suspense, has managed to name his prime minister. Tell us more about what François Bayrou brings to the table, and can he pass the budget?
Yeah, he becomes the fourth Prime Minister so far this year, and in the coming days he'll be in the building you can see behind me, the French House of Parliament, the lower house, the Assemblée Nationale, the National Assembly, defending the programme that he puts forward. He'll want to appoint ministers to his government, come up with a legislative programme that he believes can appeal to people on the left and the centre and the right of French politics. There's no change, though, from Michel Barnier in terms of the age. He's also 73, more than some 30 years more or less older than the president. He is from the south of France, from the Pyrenees Mountains. François Bayrou is the mayor of Pau, a French city in the south of the country. At the moment, he founded the Democratic Movement Party in 2007 and has aligned it pretty closely with Emmanuel Macron and in the centre of French politics. He will be trying to form a government that is representative of all political forces. However, we've already heard from the far left, who said that they'll be calling a no-confidence vote at the first possible opportunity to try to oust Mr Bayrou. The far right holding their firepower just for now, as you mentioned. The socialists have also reacted. They're pretty downhearted that there was no left-wing Prime Minister appointed by Emmanuel Macron, and they have said that they won't be voting for no-confidence vote if Mr Bayrou does not use executive powers. And you might remember Michel Barnier used executive powers last week, and then that is what sparked the no-confidence vote that he lost on the 4th of December.
Right, so when a new leader comes into the office, we generally talk about a honeymoon period, but François Bayrou has come in bang in the middle of a crisis. He's got a budget to pass, and the deadline, of course, is the 21st of December. Can he pass the budget?
Yeah, no honeymoon, you're right. Straight into the fire for Francois Bayrou, and the far right and most of the political parties have said that they would vote in favour of this emergency power because the 2025 budget collapsed with the downfall of Michel Barnier. France now needs to use this special law to roll over the 2024 budget for part of 2025 because there's no time to go through an entire new process of trying to draw up and scrutinise a whole piece of budget legislation, put it to parliamentary committees, then to Parliament, the lower house, then up to the Senate, back to the lower house. There's no time for that before we get to 2025, which is, of course, in just over 2 weeks' time. So we need, in France, they need to pass this special budgetary law, which allows for that rollover, and that will be the main piece of legislation, the main focus for Mr. Bayrou in the coming weeks.
Indeed. Thank you very much, indeed, Ross Cullen, for joining us and getting us all those details there. All right, and also to give us more perspective in terms of how things will, of course, play out. Because remember, this, of course, is a pretty delicate moment in French politics. We still don't know if things will, in fact, settle down. To tell us more on this, we're joined on our broadcast by Mr. Olivier Delage, who is a French journalist, and he's joining us live on this broadcast. Mr. Delage, thank you very much indeed, sir, for taking time out and speaking to us here on WION. Now, this, of course, is the question that is on top of a lot of people within France. Now, Michel Barnier was seen as a consensus candidate. He failed in passing the budget that had a lot of cost cutting that was involved there. Can Francois Bayrou push through this budget? Because Emmanuel Macron's agenda is that the costs need to be brought down. Pension reforms also need to be pushed through. Can Francois Barnier do that?
Well, the problems that Michel Barnier had to face have not disappeared, and they're exactly the same ones as Francois Bayrou will have to face now. Now, he's facing an impossible equation because the parliament is divided between 3 blocks, and no single block commands by itself a majority. And although there may be some common ground on specific issues, on most important things like immigration, pensions, there are strong disagreements between the various parties. So we'll see if Bayrou is more lucky or more skillful than Barnier was. There have been, though, some differences appearing in the last few days. The very fact that Barnier was toppled after such a short time has been like a shock, even though it was widely expected. And parties have started moving towards the idea that some compromise has to be found. Mm-hmm. But the realization that it has to be found doesn't mean that it will be found.
Right, interesting that you say the compromise has to be found, but it doesn't mean that it will be found. But there is this big mountain that Francois Bayrou has to climb over. 21st of December is, of course, the deadline. Can he pass a budget, especially at a time when the House is so divided in the manner that it is?
It is not as urgent as it may seem from outside. Of course, it is a pressing matter, but there has been a special law, a special bill that was passed, which allows the budget to carry on as it was in 2024. So, I mean, there will not be any shutdown like may happen in the United States, but a number of decisions have to be made, and a budget will have to be passed as early as the first days of January, if they use the fast track, or if they do a new budget altogether, it will take another 3 months. But again, it doesn't mean that civil servants will stop to be paid, that France won't be able to go around the market and so on.
Right.
It's just that important decisions have to be made.
Interesting. Now, we are in this crisis in France because of the snap elections that were called by Emmanuel Macron in the month of July. How much of a, impact or a dent is this to Emmanuel Macron's presidency that he's now struggling to have a prime minister who can pass a budget and the House in the parliament is completely divided?
Well, it's a crisis largely of his own making because no one forced him to call for snap election. He had just lost elections. His party had lost at the European elections in June. And actually, his party also lost in the snap election that he called end of June and beginning of July. So he's faced with that impossible choice, which he actually called for. And to add on that, he procrastinated for another 2 months before appointing Michel Barnier as prime minister. So the previous prime minister was kind of a caretaker and with no accountability with parliament. Right. It was like a suspended political life.
All right, we'll have to leave there. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Olivier Delarge, for joining us and getting us all those insights there. For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.